I think we're good to go. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to BWTM Sports. Now, it's an odd one for me because I don't usually do post interview reviews, but in the 10 years I've been doing interviews and talking to fighters and trainers from around the world, it's very rare that I'll come back and do a post interview reflection. This particular interview with Stacey McKinley, I suspect we will come back and listen to in 3, 4, 5, even 10 years' time, because the knowledge that Stacey McKinley dropped in this particular interview wasn't just about personal opinions and personal thoughts. It was more about the science of boxing, and regardless of whatever era we're in the world of boxing, it still remains that it's boxing and some things don't change. You're still going to be throwing jabs and right hands to body and head. The dynamics and the systems of throwing punches will still be the same, more or less. You're still going to have to render a guy unconscious. You know, if you hit a guy in the chin, he's still going to go over regardless. And so this video in particular I'm doing now is a review. Good evening, Denise. Is a review of the things Stacey McKinley said, and I was so captivated by Stacey McKinley and the things he was saying that I am repeating what he said or paraphrasing it, so you don't have to listen to the whole interview. So for those of you who don't know who Stacey McKinley is, he's a former trainer of Mike Tyson for almost 10 years. He's produced almost 30 world champions, a lot of heavyweight world champions, from Tony Tucker to Samuel Peter. Worked for Alexander Povetkin, Shannon Briggs, of course Mike Tyson for 10 years. Just recently finished training with, working with Matt Gamboa. So he's worked with the who's who of boxing. So whether you like Stacey McKinley or don't like Stacey McKinley, the one thing you can't take away from this man: first, he's a Hall of Fame trainer, one, and two, he's proven he can do the business at the highest level. Now for me, I like that. I like that. You know, a lot of cats we listen to on boxing never thrown a punch in anger, never trained a fighter, never stepped foot in the ring, never trained one world champion, let alone multiple world champions, and, you know, have a lot to say. This man, Stacey McKinley, is one we need to embrace. Boxing community, those who are on YouTube or on BWTM, we need to embrace and really listen to. As much as we listen to Uncle Bashir and other experienced trainers, this interview here gives us a lot more in detail, and I'll explain why. Because for my love that I have for Uncle Bashir, he says, I'm not here to train trainers. I get that, I hear that, but Stacey McKinley's of a different thought. He's going to say whatever he feels, however he feels it, and however the hell it comes out, he's going to say it, even to his own boss, Don King. So that'll say it all. And that's when Don King was at the height of his dominance in world boxing. So he's still talking to King today and working with King today. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the title here is Tyson is going to get knocked up by Wilder, and it's an interview review. Well, we start out, Stacey McKinley, for as long as I've known him, has always been a fan of Tyson Fury. He picked Tyson to beat Deontay Wilder in the first fight. He thought Tyson Fury, in his terms, is shake and bake, but basically one who's got a lot of movement, upper body movement. He says for a big man, he moves well, puts his punches together well, moves around the ring like a middleweight. So he's very complimentary of Tyson Fury. However, for this rematch, he's gone completely opposite, which was the alarm bells were flying there. So we'll get into it. Stacey McKinley says, the two reasons why I am not confident and I believe Wilder's going to knock out Fury is, one, the cut. He says that cut's a problem in itself. He says the way that cut was stitched up together again in the short space of time it is between Fury's last fight and this fight, and he's going in against Deontay Wilder. If Wilder hits him in that area and that opens up the cut, it's good night, because of the sort of destructive puncher that Wilder is. That's the first thing. Then he goes on to say the change of trainer. He says, if things were so good, why are you changing it? I mean, yeah, you got knocked down twice by Wilder, but if you didn't get knocked down twice by Wilder, you'd have handily won the fight. You would have won the fight. He says the first one, the first knockdown was around the back of the head. That's what knocked Fury down. The second one was a good combination. What he's basically saying here is that if Fury didn't go down, you'd won the fight. But I guess that's like saying, well, if I didn't have, if I didn't have, I don't know, if I didn't look like the sun, I'd be the moon. It's like saying that. I could have put it another way, but there's other people listening, and I've got to be careful what I say here. The point of it is this: the fact about it is Fury did go down, and he went on to say, so okay, he brings in Sugar Hill into training camp. He said, well, he knows Sugar Hill well, and he knows of the way the Kronk gym is and the Detroit way, Tommy Hearns. He says what they do is to get the fighter to sit on the shots and turn the right hand over. He says, I know because I've watched Tommy Hearns. I've worked with Emmanuel Stewart. I know how they train. I know how they move. I know the mindset. He says, well, for Fury to stand in the center of the ring and to want to trade with Wilder would be suicidal because you're giving away the shake and bake. The shake and bake is what made him win the first fight or made him successful in the first fight. The herky-jerky movement, all that stuff, which he calls shake and bake in America. For Fury not to do that, that's the way Fury did well the first fight. For him to now come out and try to knock Wilder out, he's going to get knocked out. He said the other thing is, if you try and change Tyson Fury today, you try and change his technique now. He says, he was better with Ben Davidson. He says, with Ben Davidson had worked with him for a long while. So if Davidson and Fury had a good relationship, they worked together well. So everything was well going into this fight against Wilder for the rematch. He says, why did they split? He says one of two reasons. Reason number one, as always, money. That Fury wasn't prepared to pay Davidson the money that he wanted, and therefore Davidson felt undervalued. That was one of the reasons Stacey thought as to why Ben and Tyson broke up. He said the second reason is because people have been talking in Tyson's ear. People will probably be saying to Tyson, Tyson, you can knock Wilder out. Look how many times you rock Wilder. And so therefore, because of that, and people whispering in Tyson's ear, Tyson has decided to go and change and get another trainer. He says those are the two probable reasons as to why Ben is not with Tyson Fury. But then he went on to really go on a scathing attack on Ben Davison and warned Ben Davison this. He said, listen, you need to be training with Sugar Hill. You need to go and learn with Sugar Hill. That would be good for your development as a trainer, as a young trainer. It's good for you. He said, let me tell you a little story. He says, there was a guy that used to train with Sugar Ray Leonard. Okay? And he said, because he wasn't getting paid enough, he was gonna leave Sugar Ray Leonard. So he had the opportunity to train with Sugar Ray Leonard and train Sugar Ray Leonard. He left Sugar Ray Leonard because he wasn't getting paid enough money. And now he regretted it because of what Sugar Ray Leonard went on to achieve. You've got the heavyweight the linear heavyweight champion of the world. One of the best heavyweights, if not the best heavyweight in the world, to train. And you're going to walk away from that? Stacey McKinley then goes on to say, basically, that if Ben Davison has that sort of attitude, he will not last in boxing. He says, because boxing, you have to have thick skin and you have to have a different mindset. He said, you have that mindset in boxing, then you're finished. You're not going to last long. You'll run through real quickly. So McKinley has given Ben Davison a warning, and he needs to go back and re-listen to this interview because, again, McKinley talking with a lot of sense and a lot of knowledge. He's probably seen trailers come and go all the time. He knows what makes them stick. He knows what makes them go. So that's about the whole Tyson Fury thing. He said, if he decides to go down the Detroit route, he said, nobody can train Tyson Fury how to fight now. Nobody. So now you're going to go over a trainer that hardly knows you to go in a rematch against Deontay Wilder? No. He says, now I'm going like probably 60-40 in Wilder's favour, even more so. He says the bookies will look into it and say, okay, well, all right, who's the trainer he's with now? Oh, okay, he's with Sugar Hill. How many heavyweight champions has Sugar Hill trained? In fact, how many heavyweights has Sugar Hill trained? How much success has Sugar Hill had with heavyweights? And then they'll go and say, okay, What's the relationship between Tyson Fury and Sugar Hill compared to the relationship between Ben Davison and Tyson Fury? Then they'll look at the cut, plus knockdowns that Wilder had before. So he thinks that Wilder is becoming more confident as a fighter as well. So he believes that Wilder's going to get the knockout in this rematch. He says, don't look too much into the fight with Otto Wallin and Swartz, where he didn't look that great. He said that's because of the lower opposition. He thinks that Tyson Fury will rise his profile and become a better fighter from it. So we moved on, and he talked about the heavyweight championship. Well, he talked about Anthony Joshua and his change of style. He said that Anthony Joshua fought like a scared man. He said he should have knocked out Andy Ruiz. And as for Andy Ruiz, he basically said Andy Ruiz is a disgrace to boxing. He ate himself out the heavyweight championship of the world. He should be banned from boxing. He's a disgrace to boxing. And every heavyweight champion that has held the belt, he's a disgrace and shouldn't be allowed to box. He said all the people that spent time and money to go and see Andy Ruiz fight, and he let down his people, he let down the boxing community, he let down his supporters, an absolute letdown, disgrace. He said, I'll tell him to his face, it's a disgrace. So that was the Andy Ruiz thing. We went on to talk about Errol Spence, and we talked about fighters not being looked after in the world of boxing. He says that today, fighters control their destiny. Back in the day, your manager ensured that no matter where you went as a fighter, you were shadowed all the time. Very much like Tunde Ajayi does with Anthony Yarde, doesn't let him out his sight. I get that, I understand it. That's how it was in the olden days. He said, look at Errol Spence. I made this point in a video previously. He says Spence is an alcoholic. He's got a problem with alcohol. He says, how can you allow a guy like Spence, who's a superstar or on the verge of becoming a superstar, be allowed to be near drink and then getting in a car? He says that is the reason why boxing today is the state it's in. We're not going to get superstars, and they're not going to last because they go off the rails and there's nobody to maintain and keep them there. He talks about PBC not having a PBC training camp. He said there needs to be a training camp. He said that's what Don King had. That's why Don King was so successful. He said because all the fighters that King worked with, he made sure that those fighters had an assigned trainer, and he had somebody looking after that fighter 24 hours a day, which is stuff about boxing that we really don't talk about today, but is essential when looking after investment. Don King saw it as an investment. He made sure there was a strength and conditioner, made sure there was a nutritionist. He talked about the process of Oliver McCall and how they got Oliver McCall ready to knock out Lennox Lewis, and how they got Tony Tucker, who beat Oliver McCall as a pro, to spar with Oliver McCall before Oliver McCall fought Lennox Lewis, with Manny Stewart as a trainer of Oliver McCall. They gave Oliver McCall strength and conditioning trainer. They gave him a trainer. Stacey McKinley was the trainer at the time, and McCall couldn't move out of sight of Stacey McKinley. Stacey McKinley also talked about Ricardo Mayorga. It's a famous story. He talked about boxing management. He talked about how King wanted him to stop Mayorga from smoking the 40 fags a day and the drinking. He said, look, you can't do that. So he said to Mayorga, here's the deal. I want you to train from Monday to Friday. Right? He says, on the weekend, you can smoke as much as you want and drink as much as you want. But during the week, I need you to train. He says, this is management. He says, you can't take all that stuff away from them because of getting to camp. So you reduce the amount that they use and you manage that situation. Again, stuff that you don't hear boxing trainers talk about. And I found it was so important. He then went on to talk about fighters such as Tank Davis. He talked about Tank Davis and how Tank Davis is in control of his own training camp. That's why he's coming into these fights overweight, because he's spending his time and he's not training properly for fights. And he's the boss. And if you're the boss of your training camps, then this is what's going to happen. He says that if he fought Gamboa 4 or 5 years ago, Gamboa would have knocked him out. He said he wasn't impressed with the fight with Gamboa. He says that basically that Tank Davis is not the star that everyone makes him out to be. Again, this is something I repeated. And I said over and over again about Tank Davis. He then talked about Floyd Mayweather. He said the mindset of Floyd Mayweather is very different to his fighters. He said he watched Floyd Mayweather train. And to paraphrase it, he looked at Floyd Mayweather as a young fighter, he looked him in his eyes and he said he could see something in Floyd. He said the same look he had in Floyd's eyes is the same look that Sugar Ray Leonard had. And he told Floyd he was going to win titles at 4 different weights. Floyd then later on, obviously as he's older, Floyd invited Stacey McKinley at one dinner to sit down and have a chat with him. He said, look, you were wrong. I didn't win at 4 weight divisions. I won at 6 weight divisions. But the principle of the training and the way Floyd dedicated himself, this is something that a lot of fighters don't get, the way Floyd was so dedicated in the sport of boxing, and that's what's missing with the fighters today. The fighters see Floyd's money, but they don't see his dedication, and that is the big problem. Floyd didn't need to be told to get into camp or get into shape. Didn't need to be told that. He knew what was necessary. So those are some of the things that Stacey McKinley spoke about. Talked about Julian Williams, something I spoke about earlier on the show, that I didn't think that Julian Williams was that particularly good a fighter. And he talked about Gelson Rosario. And he said that Rosario is a very, very strong fighter, very good fighter, very underrated. And he said what we saw against Julian Williams wasn't even a scratch of the surface as to what's coming. He says after about 2 more training camps, this guy will clean up the light middleweight division. He's that confident. He's that confident that he'll clean up the light middleweight division. He says he'll take Charlo as well. He says the guy takes a great shot, hard puncher, dedicated to the gym, and the real deal in that division. He says he's known Gelson for a long time now. He says this guy is the real deal. And he knows. He knows. So that's paraphrasing a lot of the interview. And there's a lot more in there, of course, out of Stacey McKinley's own mouth. But there you have it. Fighters taking control of their careers and not doing the right things, not being guided in the right way, trainers that are just not up to scratch. And it tells you something about the society today in boxing, where people like Stacey McKinley are not being brought in. Old school understand what he's about. Stacey McKinley also made a point. He said he talked about a fighter called Joe Gans, and he was first African American fighter, I think, to win a world title. I think he was from the same place as Tank Davis. And Tank Davis didn't know who he was. Tank Davis was joking around and laughing at the weigh-in, and he said this. He said that you don't know who he is. He's from Baltimore, and your trainer don't know who he is from Baltimore. He says like the blind leading the blind, and that's what's going on in boxing today. He finished by saying this. He said he was talking about when you lose weight and trying to lose weight quickly, at a weigh-in. He says Broner was telling Tank Davis how to lose the weight. After you lose the weight, how to replenish the energy. And Broner was telling Tank Davis that he needs to drink lots of water and orange juice. That's how he replenishes all the energy that he lost after losing the weight and the fluids to rehydrate. And Stacey McKinley says, yeah, that works for 3 rounds in an amateur bout. But as a pro, there's certain things you can get from the doctor that you can get, which are legal, to rehydrate your body. I can't remember what he called it again. You have to listen to it in the interview. But he basically said that any wise trainer would know about these things, and that by drinking water and drinking orange juice, yeah, that'll help you for a couple of rounds, but you're going to blow going down the stretch. And that's what we saw with Tank Davis against Gamboa. So he doesn't rate much of Tank Davis. He's a good fighter, but that's it. So there you have it. It's an interview that you need to listen to. The interview I did with James Bashir, that interview seems to be coming back a lot. A lot of boxing experts and people across the boxing media seem to know the story, but then myself and Bashir know the story about Dillian Whyte and Deontay Wilder. Listen, Deontay Wilder getting dropped by Vladimir Klitschko. I'll tell you the true story. In that same camp, Joshua and Dillian Whyte almost came to blows, and Bashir had to jump in between the two of them. Who else was in that training camp? Richard Towers was in that training camp as well. And Deontay Wilder did get dropped by Klitschko, but he came back and he held his own. So if you want to hear that interview, the full interview, it's a 2-hour interview. So if you want to hear it It was in 2013 we did that interview with James Ellerby. In fact, it was one of my first interviews I did with James Ellerby. If you want to listen to that interview, check it out. I think it's Deontay Wilder got dropped by Vladimir Klitschko. It's Bayloric TV with James Ellerby. Check that interview out and listen to it in its entirety, and you'll get to hear the full story, because it's an interview that in 2013 has cropped up so many times. I hear it so many times. I have people over Twitter telling me about my own damn interview. Ain't that a cheek? Ain't that a cheek? People telling me about my own damn interview. So, yeah, go back and check that interview out. It's something you can learn from. Now, if you're wondering why you can't leave messages in the chat section, it's very simple. Twofold. Reason number one is we have idiots across YouTube. That's what they are. That like to leave troll comments. And it's a troll-free zone now. So when you see members only, become a member. $2.99 a month. And you can be able to drop your comments in as much as you like. $2.99 a month. All you have to do is go next to the subscribe button here. If you look down on the video itself, there's a join button. Smash that join button and it will give you all the perks, including, if you look at Denise Ward's here, she's got a badge there which shows how long she's been a member of BWTM Sports. So it's membership. So as a subscriber, you will get to see some videos, but not all the videos. But again, please check out that interview I did with Stacey McKinley, and also the hard-hitting, undefeated Stephen Nelson, the middleweight, the super middleweight in fact, who's making a lot of noise. Again, we're presenting you these fighters before they hit the big time. He's with Top Rank, and he tells us the real story behind Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. Well, he would know. He's known Terence Crawford since he was 12 years old, right? So he gives us the insight on the Terence Crawford situation, the PBC situation, why Crawford and Porter are not fighting, why Crawford hasn't fought other PBC fighters, and that it's a myth that PBC fighters don't fight Top Rank fighters. He says, well, look, Wilder's fighting against Fury, right? Top Rank versus PBC. So it's a myth. Don't buy into the hype. And he also said, oh yeah, there was a story going around about Crawford moving up to fight Canelo. He says that's BS. What basically happened was there was some novice, which is what basically, paraphrasing what Stephen Nelson said, he basically said there were basically clowns asking stupid questions of Terence Crawford. So Terence Crawford said, you know what, after I win this fight, I'm going to move up, maybe I'll move up to 160 pound, maybe 135 pound, and I'll fight Canelo. So basically that was taken and blown out of context by boxing media as per usual, and it says Terence Crawford and Canelo will fight. So Terence Crawford never said he wants to fight or the fight's going to happen between him and Canelo. So to clear that up, please do listen to the Stephen Nelson interview. Don't get caught out. Get to know early these fighters. We're going to bring in a lot more other fighters onto the channel, just like we did back then, and just like we did back then when we brought you Crawford, when we brought you Thurman, you know, when we brought you Fury, when we brought you Usyk. Those guys weren't too bad, and they've all gone on to be champions or undisputed champions. So we're not doing too bad, and we're going to do it all over again in this next decade, and even more we're bringing you. So that's it from us at BWTM Sports. We hope you enjoyed this stream, and check out those two interviews. And of course, if you remember, we've got lots more goodies coming your way. This is just the start. This is BWTM Sports, and we're out. Have a great evening. Take care.